Hey humans, it's Danny here. As part of my security journey, I often come across a number of security reports, such as the one on screen at the moment, the Microsoft Digital Defense Report. Interestingly, Microsoft have been producing a security intelligence report since about 2005 and have renamed it this year, due to the fact that it's grown in scope quite dramatically. Mark Anderson, who's the National Security Officer from Microsoft, presented to this report. It's about 40 minutes long. If you can find that recording, I'd strongly recommend watching it. It's a reasonably thorough overview of the report, and he goes through in great detail, helps you to digest the information that's there and gives you some guidance as to what to target in the report, unless you want to go through and read the entire report, which I also recommend as well. There's a lot there though. One of the interesting things that Microsoft talk about, and again, it's setting in context how big or how much data that they're analyzing in their networks and in their environments to get some of this information about the state of security. So the slide on screen talks about a lot of the signals that they get and the number of signals, and the 8 trillion signals a day, security signals a day, equates to about 93 million a second, which is staggering when you think about it. And Microsoft also talked to us about a few years back committing to spending $1 billion annually on cybersecurity, which is a staggering figure, and adds a lot of weight, I guess, to the report that they're producing here. They've also not just made this an information dump for you. So there's some great stuff here about how to read the report, where Microsoft are talking about telemetry that they've gathered, their best practice, and some actionable learnings that you can take away from this. The best practice, I think, is pretty valuable because it gives you some good recommendations as you're reading this report as to how to improve your security. The report's broken down into 3 main sections. The first is the state of cybercrime. So not surprisingly, phishing and business email compromise is way up there, and a combination of the two, in fact, as the main way that hackers or attackers are trying to gain access to information into your environment. The shift from malware attacks to phishing attacks is there because there's a greater return of investment for attackers, and that's an interesting concept in itself, that attackers are seeing this as a business in the way that they're approaching attacks. Some great telemetry there, and what Microsoft is seeing in the digital crimes unit. Some interesting top spoofed brands and the top 10 targeted industries for BEC attacks. So malware and ransomware were also called out in the report. They were outlining some quite frightening statistics there. But Microsoft also outlined the types of things that can be done to minimize the risk of those attacks, and how to avoid those attacks that are commonly used to gain access and spread ransomware in particular. IoT devices also received a good overview with a couple of pages talking about some of the recommendations or key insights, findings, and recommendations, which is a little bit more thorough than some of the other areas in the report. And I think that's to highlight that this is an often missed area of security, and Microsoft are focusing a little bit more on that. So Microsoft talks about nation state threats, and they outline a sample of the nation state attackers and their activities. Microsoft's approach and the list of targets that have been used, and the common operational aims were also identified in the report, and primarily being espionage, people trying to gain access to information, disruption, or destruction, I should say. So not surprisingly, the common attack techniques used by nation state actors around reconnaissance in particular were using password spray attacks. Not only for corporate accounts, but also Microsoft mentioned for personal accounts. So where people might not have the same protection, so things like complex passwords or multi-factor authentication, and making them targets for surveillance. So credential harvesting also through spear phishing email, so targeted attacks there. Imitation domains and spoof login pages are also highlighted as ways that have been used to gain access. And of course, malware, which still represents one of the most commonly used methods, although not quite up there with phishing. And finally, given the year that we've just had, VPN exploits were also mentioned. As you know, a lot of people had to move from working in an office to moving to work from home or work on an isolated network where we didn't necessarily have a trust boundary established. And so VPNs were commonly used, and an increase in attacks on VPNs took place as a result of that. So the third section of the report focused on security and the remote workforce. So this highlighted the differences in which a lot of people were forced to work and highlighted a change in the moat castle analogy that we've used in the past about protecting security and protecting the borders of our networks. So there's a good explanation that Microsoft provide here about the zero trust model, security model. And it's well worth a read to understand Microsoft's approach and to help you think about it if you haven't already about the value that model provides. So not surprisingly, devices and patch management was one of the first things that Microsoft talked about here for obvious and important reasons, along with attacks on infrastructure, so around distributed denial of service attacks. And some of the tactics around diversion that Mark Anderson in particular talked about in his report, or his review of the report, I should say, where in some cases DDoS is used as a diversionary tactic while another attack might be going on back-end systems because the DDoS looks like a higher priority attack. And there's some interesting information there about the DDoS attack types and information there, and some things that can be done, as you'll see spread out through the report. Insider-based attacks and information rights management were also covered in the report with a good summary around insider threats and insider risk management. There was also an interesting section here on enterprise resilience, which is also talking about that human element of resiliency in a year of such significant change that a lot of people went through. In the last part of the report, Microsoft talks about actionable learnings. So we're provided with a list of steps to take, and there's a quote there which I think I'll use because it's written really well, where Microsoft say, we recommend organizations take a proactive approach to shoring up their security and resiliency by using the following controls. While all these learnings are valid and beneficial recommendations for a cybersecurity program, we've selected our most salient points for each chapter and mapped them with icons as shown below. So that's a great way to say, here are some things, some summaries that we've taken out of the report to help you get started, steps you can take today that will be meaningful and actionable to helping you improve your security. And not surprisingly, at the top of that list is adopt MFA. So my advice with the report in general, and this is just a quick summary of the report for you, my advice is start with a summary from Mark Anderson and then download the report that I've been sharing on screen and focus on the areas that relevant to you. Do a deeper dive on those. If you can, read through, if you've got time, read through the entire report. There's a lot of valuable information there and a lot of good recommendations from Microsoft to help you be more secure. So I hope this was a valuable review of the Digital Defense Report. I hope it gives you some insight and some valuable information to go ahead and use. And thank you for your time. And as always, stay secure.